David always stayed late at the university observatory, while other students were out having fun or sleeping. He would spend hours looking through telescopes and studying the stars. It was his favorite place in the whole world, quiet, peaceful, and far away from all the noise of campus life. On this particular Tuesday night in October, the sky was perfectly clear. David had been working on his research project about distant galaxies for almost 3 hours when he heard footsteps behind him. This was strange because the observatory was usually empty after midnight. He turned around and saw a young woman standing near the entrance. She had long dark hair and the most unusual eyes he had ever seen. They seemed to catch the light in a way that made them almost glow in the darkness. She was about his age, maybe a little younger, and there was something about the way she moved that seemed different from other people. "I hope I'm not bothering you," she said with a soft voice that had a slight accent he couldn't place. "I saw the light was on and thought someone might be here." David was usually shy around strangers, especially women, but something about her made him feel comfortable right away. "No, not at all. Are you a student here? I don't think I've seen you before." She walked closer to where he was standing near the main telescope. "I'm Luna," she said simply. "I'm doing some research here for a few months." "What about you? You seem to know your way around this place pretty well." "I'm David. I'm a graduate student in astrophysics. I practically live here." He laughed, feeling a bit embarrassed about admitting how much time he spent alone with the stars. Luna smiled, and her whole face seemed to light up. "Astrophysics? That's wonderful. What are you working on tonight?" David expected her to be polite, but not really interested, like most people were when he talked about his work. Instead, when he started explaining his research about galaxy formations, she listened with complete attention. Not only that, but she asked questions that showed she understood everything he was saying. "The spiral arms in that galaxy you're studying," she said, pointing to the computer screen showing his data. "They're probably being affected by dark matter interactions that happened about 2 million years ago." David stared at her. What she just said was incredibly advanced stuff that even his professors sometimes struggled with. "How did you know that? Are you in astrophysics too?" "I've always been interested in space," she said, but something in her voice suggested there was more to it than that. They spent the next 4 hours talking about stars, planets, black holes, and the possibility of life on other worlds. Luna knew things about distant star systems that David had never read in any textbook. She could describe the exact color and temperature of stars that were hundreds of light years away, as if she had seen them personally. "Have you ever wondered what it would be like to travel to other planets?" Luna asked as they both looked through the telescope at Jupiter. "All the time," David replied. "Sometimes I dream about what it would feel like to stand on a world completely different from Earth, to see alien sunsets, or maybe even meet other intelligent life forms." Luna was quiet for a long moment. When David looked at her, she seemed lost in thought, almost sad about something. "What if I told you that other intelligent life is closer than you think?" she said quietly. Before David could ask what she meant, they heard voices coming from the hallway. Other students were arriving for early morning observations. Luna immediately stepped back from the telescope and gathered her things. "I should go," she said, suddenly seeming nervous. "Wait, will I see you again? Maybe we could have coffee sometime and talk more about your research." Luna paused at the door. "I come here most nights around this time. Maybe we'll run into each other again." And then she was gone, leaving David standing alone in the observatory. He realized he didn't know her last name, what department she was in, or even if she was really a student at the university. But something about their conversation had felt more real and exciting than anything he had experienced in years. The next few days, David found himself thinking about Luna constantly. He had met plenty of smart people in his academic life, but none of them had Luna's combination of knowledge and mystery. There was something about the way she talked about space that made it seem like she was sharing personal memories rather than just scientific facts. He started staying at the observatory even later, hoping she would show up again. On Friday night, just when he was about to give up and go home, he heard those familiar footsteps. "I was hoping you'd be here," Luna said as she walked into the room. David felt his heart skip a beat. "I was hoping you'd come back too." This time, their conversation lasted until sunrise. They talked about everything from the technical details of space travel to their personal dreams and fears. David learned that Luna had grown up far from here, in a place she described as very different from anywhere. She seemed to have traveled a lot and had experiences that sounded almost impossible. "Where exactly are you from?" David asked as the first light of dawn started coming through the observatory windows. Luna looked at him for a long time before answering. "Somewhere very far away. Somewhere you probably wouldn't believe if I told you." As the sun came up, Luna gathered her things to leave again, but this time she turned back before reaching the door. "David, can I ask you something? Do you believe that some connections between people go beyond what we can understand with science?" "I think so." "Why do you ask?" "Because talking with you feels like something I've been waiting for my whole life, even though we just met a few days ago." After she left, David sat in the empty observatory watching the sunrise and wondering if he was falling in love with someone he barely knew. What he didn't realize was that this was just the beginning of the most incredible and heartbreaking story of his life. Over the next few weeks, David and Luna met almost every night at the observatory. What started as casual conversations about astronomy had grown into something much deeper. David found himself looking forward to these meetings more than anything else in his life. Luna would arrive around midnight, always seeming to appear quietly without him hearing her footsteps until she was already there. She had this way of moving that was graceful and smooth, like she was floating rather than walking. David noticed these little details about her because he was becoming fascinated by everything she did. "Tell me about where you grew up," David asked one night as they sat on the observatory floor, looking up through the open roof at the stars above. Luna was quiet for a long time. It was a place where the night sky looked very different from this one. The stars were brighter, and there were colors in the darkness that don't exist here on Earth. "That sounds beautiful." "Was it somewhere rural, away from city lights?" "You could say that," Luna replied with a small smile that seemed to hide something. "Very far from any cities you would know." David was getting used to Luna's mysterious answers, but they only made him more curious about her past. She would often say things that seemed impossible, like she had personal experience with places and events that no normal person could have witnessed. One night, she casually mentioned details about a solar storm that had happened in 1859, describing it as if she had seen it personally. When David pointed out that this was over 160 years ago, Luna looked confused for a moment before laughing nervously. I read about it in old research papers. I have a very good memory for historical events." But David was starting to notice a pattern. Luna's knowledge of space wasn't just academic. She could predict meteor showers days before they were officially announced. She knew exactly when satellites would pass overhead and could point to specific stars and tell him their exact temperatures and compositions without looking anything up. "How do you know all this stuff?" David asked one evening after Luna had correctly predicted the exact time a particular planet would be visible. "I've always been good at astronomy," she said, but she wouldn't meet his eyes when she said it. David tried looking up Luna's name in the university directory, but there was no record of anyone by that name in any department. He even asked around in the astronomy department, but none of the professors had heard of a visiting researcher named Luna. "Maybe she's from a different university and just has access to use our facilities," David told himself. But deep down, he knew something wasn't adding up. Despite all the mysteries surrounding her, David was falling deeply in love. Luna had this way of listening to him that made him feel like the most important person in the world. When he talked about his dreams of space exploration, she didn't laugh or think he was being unrealistic. Instead, she encouraged him to think bigger and dream further. "What if I told you that traveling to other worlds isn't as impossible as people think?" she said one night. "I'd ask you how you could be so sure," David replied. Luna looked at Him with those strange, luminous eyes. Maybe someday I'll be able to show you things that will change how you see the universe. Their relationship was becoming more than friendship, but there was always something holding Luna back. Whenever David tried to get closer to her emotionally, she would pull away slightly, as if she was afraid of something. I care about you, David, more than you could possibly understand. She told him one night when he had worked up the courage to tell her how he felt. But my situation is very complicated. What kind of complications? Are you married? Do you have a boyfriend somewhere else? It's not that simple. There are things about my life that would be impossible for you to understand right now. Around this time, David started noticing strange things happening when Luna was around. Electronic devices would sometimes malfunction near her. His laptop would shut down for no reason. And the radio telescope would pick up unusual signals that disappeared as soon as she left. One night, David's phone camera stopped working completely when he tried to take a picture of them together. Luna seemed genuinely upset about this, but not surprised. Technology doesn't always work well around me, she explained. I seem to have some kind of interference effect on electronics. David also started having incredibly vivid dreams. In these dreams, he would find himself standing on landscapes that looked nothing like Earth. There were purple skies with multiple moons, cities made of crystal that seemed to grow from the ground, and beings of light who communicated without speaking. The strangest part was that in these dreams, Luna was always there with him, but she looked slightly different. Her skin would have a faint glow, and her eyes would be completely silver, reflecting light like mirrors. I've been having the weirdest dreams lately, David mentioned to Luna one night. She froze. What kind of dreams? Dreams about other worlds. Strange places with different colored skies. And you're always in them. But you look different somehow. Luna stood up abruptly and walked to the other side of the observatory. Dreams are just our minds processing information. They don't mean anything. But David could see that his words had disturbed her greatly. She seemed scared, which was completely unlike her usual calm confidence. As their relationship deepened, David became more and more convinced that Luna was hiding something major about her identity. He loved her deeply, but he also felt frustrated by her constant evasiveness about her past and her refusal to let him into certain parts of her life. I feel like I'm falling in love with a ghost, he told her one night. You're here with me, but part of you is always somewhere else, somewhere I can't reach. Luna's eyes filled with tears, which was the first time David had seen her show such strong emotion. You have no idea how much I wish things could be different, she whispered. But some barriers can't be crossed, no matter how much we want them to be. David didn't understand what she meant, but he could hear the pain in her voice. Whatever was keeping her distant from him, it was hurting her as much as it was hurting him. What David didn't know was that Luna was fighting an internal battle every single day. Her feelings for him were growing stronger, but she knew that loving him was the most dangerous thing she could possibly do. Not just dangerous for her, but potentially dangerous for him too. The time was coming when she would have to make an impossible choice, and David had no idea that their beautiful, mysterious love story was about to take a turn that would change both of their lives forever. 3 months had passed since David first met Luna, and he had never been happier or more confused in his entire life. Every night they spent together felt magical, but Luna's mysterious behavior was becoming harder to ignore. David decided that tonight would be different. He was going to ask her directly about all the strange things he had noticed. He prepared a special evening for them. Instead of meeting at the observatory, he had arranged to use the rooftop of the science building, where they could see the stars without any interference from the telescope equipment. He brought a blanket, some coffee, and all the courage he could gather. This is beautiful, David, Luna said when she saw what he had set up, but there was something sad in her voice. Like she already knew this night was going to be important. They sat together under the stars, and for the first time in weeks, David felt Luna truly relax. She seemed different tonight, more open somehow, as if she had made a decision about something. Luna, I need to ask you something, and I hope you'll give me an honest answer this time, David began carefully. She nodded slowly. I know. You deserve the truth. I've been carrying this secret for too long. David felt his heart racing. Finally, he was going to understand the mystery that surrounded the woman he loved. Nothing about you makes sense in a normal way, he continued. You know things no human being should know. You can predict astronomical events that haven't been published anywhere. Electronic devices stop working around you. I've checked everywhere. And there's no record of you at this university or any other university. Luna was quiet, staring up at the stars as if she was looking for something specific. And these dreams I've been having, David went on, they feel more real than my actual life sometimes. In them, you're always there. But you look different, like you're glowing from inside. David. Luna said softly, what I'm about to tell you is going to sound impossible. But I need you to listen with an open mind. She stood up and walked to the edge of the rooftop. Her back turned to him. In the moonlight, David noticed something strange. There seemed to be a very faint light surrounding her, so subtle he wasn't sure if he was imagining it. I'm not from Earth, she said simply. David felt like the world had stopped spinning. What do you mean? Luna turned around to face him, and as she did, something extraordinary happened. Her skin began to glow with a soft, silvery light that seemed to come from within. Her eyes changed completely, becoming like mirrors that reflected the starlight. She was still beautiful, still recognizably Luna, but clearly not human. I come from a world that orbits the star you call Vega, she said. And her voice had a different quality now, like it was echoing from far away. My people sent me here as part of a research mission. We've been studying Earth and its inhabitants for many years. David couldn't speak. His mind was trying to process what he was seeing and hearing, but it felt like trying to understand a language he had never heard before. The dreams you've been having are real memories. Luna continued. When beings like me form emotional connections with humans, it sometimes creates a psychic link. You've been seeing glimpses of my world, my real home. This can't be real, David whispered. This has to be some kind of dream. Luna walked back to him, and as she got closer, he could feel a strange energy radiating from her. It wasn't frightening, but it was definitely not human. I know it's hard to believe. 3 months ago, I would never have imagined I would be telling you this, but David, what's happened between us was never supposed to happen. What do you mean? My people have very strict rules about contact with humans. We're supposed to observe and study, but never get personally involved, never. Form emotional attachments. Tears were running down Luna's glowing face. Falling in love with you is the greatest violation of our laws that I could possibly commit. David felt like his heart was breaking and soaring at the same time. The woman he loved was from another world, and she had just admitted that she loved him back. So what does this mean for us? He asked. Luna's expression became even sadder. It means I have to leave. My people have already detected that something is wrong. They're sending a ship to retrieve me tomorrow night. No, David said, standing up and reaching for her. We can figure this out. Maybe you could stay here, or maybe I could come with you. David, you don't understand. If they discover that I've revealed our existence to a human, the consequences would be terrible. Not just for me, but potentially for your entire planet. My people might decide that Earth is too dangerous to leave alone. The glow round Luna was getting brighter, and David realized she was becoming more emotional. Whatever she was, her feelings affected her physical appearance. There has to be another way. David pleaded. There's one option, Luna said quietly, but it would mean giving up everything we have together. What option? My people have technology that can selectively erase memories. I could remove all memory of our relationship from my own mind. If I don't remember you or Earth in a personal way, then I wouldn't have technically violated our laws. David felt like he had been punched in the stomach. You would forget me completely? I would remember this planet and my mission here, but I wouldn't remember falling in love with you. I wouldn't remember these 3 months we've spent together. To me, you would be just another human subject I observed during my research. But I would still remember you. I would remember everything. Yes, and I'm sorry for that, but it's the only way to protect both of our worlds. David grabbed her hands, which felt warm despite the strange light coming from her skin. Please don't do this. We can find another way. Maybe we could hide. Or maybe your people would understand. David, you don't know my people. They fought wars over smaller violations than this. If they knew I had shared our technology and our existence with a human, because of romantic feelings, it could start a conflict that would destroy everything you've ever known. Luna pulled a small device from her pocket. It looked like nothing David had ever seen before, made of some kind of crystal that pulsed with internal light. This device can rewrite specific neural pathways. It will remove all emotional memories, connect it to you while leaving everything else intact. What if you're wrong? What if there's another solution we haven't thought of? David, I've been thinking about this every day. Since I realized I was falling in love with you, this is the only way. Luna activated the device, and it began humming with a sound that seemed to vibrate through David's bones. Before I do this, I want you to know that these 3 months with you have been the most beautiful experience of my life on my world. We don't form individual emotional bonds the way humans do. You taught me what love means, Luna. Please, I also want you to know that even though I won't remember you, somewhere deep inside, part of me always will. Love changes us on levels deeper than memory. Before David could say anything else, Luna pressed the device to her temple. There was a bright flash of light, and she collapsed to the ground. David rushed to her side. She was unconscious, but breathing normally. As he watched, the glow around her skin faded away, and she looked completely human again. When Luna opened her eyes, a few minutes later, she looked around in confusion. Where am I? She asked. Who are you? David's heart shattered into a million pieces. The woman he loved was staring at him like he was a complete stranger. You? David couldn't form words. Luna stood up and brushed off her clothes. I seem to have lost some time. I was conducting research, and now I'm on this rooftop with someone I don't recognize. She looked at David with polite confusion, the way you might look at someone who had stopped you on the street to ask for directions. I should go. My mission here is complete. And just like that, she walked away. David watched her disappear down the stairwell, taking with her every moment of happiness he had ever known. He stayed on that rooftop until sunrise, crying and trying to convince himself that the whole thing had been an elaborate hallucination. But deep down, he knew it had all been real. The love of his life was gone, and she didn't even remember his name. David had no idea that this wasn't really the end of their story. Love, as Luna had said, changes us on levels deeper than memory. And some connections are so strong that not even alien technology can completely erase them. But he wouldn't discover this for another 5 long, painful years. 5 years had passed since that terrible night on the rooftop, and David's life had become something he barely recognized. The bright, promising graduate student who once dreamed of a normal career in astrophysics was gone, replaced by a man obsessed with finding proof that his memories were real. David now lived alone in a small apartment on the outskirts of town, surrounded by radio equipment, computers, and walls covered with star charts and mathematical equations. His neighbors thought he was crazy, and honestly, most days David wondered if they were right. Every morning, David would wake up and spend the first few minutes hoping that maybe today he would stop thinking about Luna. Maybe today he could move on with his life like a normal person. But then he would see his journals, dozens of notebooks, filled with every detail he could remember about their 3 months together, and the obsession would take hold again. He had tried to forget, really tried, after Luna disappeared. David had attempted to continue his graduate studies, but he couldn't focus on anything else. His professors noticed the change immediately. Where he used to be their most dedicated student, David became distracted, always staring out windows at the sky, always asking strange questions about extraterrestrial life. David, you need to focus on your actual research. His advisor had told him after he submitted a paper about possible alien communication signals, instead of his assigned project on galaxy formations. But David couldn't focus on normal astronomy anymore. Every time he looked through a telescope, He hoped he might see something that would prove Luna's world existed. Every radio signal from space made his heart race, thinking it might be a message from her people. His friends and family had tried to help at first. They assumed he was having a mental breakdown from stress and encouraged him to see a therapist. David had tried that too, sitting in comfortable offices trying to explain to worried doctors about the alien woman who had loved him and then erased herself from existence. David, it's very common for people under extreme stress to create elaborate fantasies. Dr. Peterson had explained during one of their sessions. Your mind may have created this story about an alien girlfriend to cope with feelings of isolation and academic pressure, but I have physical evidence, David had insisted, showing her the detailed journals, the photographs of strange radio signals his equipment had detected, the documentation of electronic malfunctions that had happened. Around Luna, memories can feel very real even when they're not based in reality. The mind is incredibly good at creating false memories that seem completely authentic. After 6 months of therapy sessions that went nowhere, David stopped going. If everyone thought he was crazy, then he would be crazy alone. He dropped out of graduate school, which broke his parents' hearts. They had been so proud of their son, the future scientist, and now he was living like a hermit, spending all his time and money on equipment to search for signals from space. David, please come home, his mother would plead during their weekly phone calls that became monthly, then almost never. We're worried about you. This obsession isn't healthy. But David couldn't go home. Going home meant admitting that Luna had never existed, that the most real and beautiful experience of his life had been a delusion. He would rather be alone and crazy than give up the truth. To pay for his rent and his growing collection of radio equipment, David took odd jobs around town. He worked at electronics stores, repaired computers, did maintenance work at the university where he used to be a student. His former classmates would sometimes see him around campus and whisper to each other about what had happened to him. The hardest part wasn't the loneliness or the financial struggles. The hardest part was the doubt that crept in during his weakest moments. Sometimes, usually late at night when he was alone with his equipment, David would wonder if everyone else was right. Maybe he had suffered some kind of mental breakdown. Maybe Luna had been a hallucination brought on by too much stress and too little sleep. But then he would open one of his journals and read his detailed notes about their conversations. Or he would look at the strange radio signals his equipment had recorded during the weeks she was round, and he would know that it had all been real. You can't hallucinate mathematical equations or electromagnetic readings. David's equipment had grown more sophisticated over the years. He had learned to build his own radio telescopes and had developed methods for detecting unusual signals that mainstream science ignored. His apartment looked like a mad scientist's laboratory, with wires and computers covering every surface. His neighbors complained about the interference his equipment caused with their televisions and phones, but David didn't care. He was on a mission that was more important than their entertainment. Every night, David would scan the skies around the star Vega, the star Luna had said was her home. He had calculated the distance, the travel time, the most likely communication, frequencies an advanced civilization might use. He had developed theories about how Luna's people might try to contact Earth. If they ever decided to reveal themselves, the dreams had never stopped. Even 5 years later, David still had vivid dreams about Luna's world. Purple skies, crystal cities, beings of light who communicated through thoughts instead of words. Sometimes in these dreams, he would see Luna, but she never recognized him. She would look at him with those strange silver eyes, but there was no love there, no memory of what they had shared. David had filled 17 notebooks with descriptions of these dreams, treating them like scientific data. He drew pictures of the landscapes he saw, wrote down conversations he remembered, documented every detail that might be important later. His former professors thought he had lost his mind completely. Dr. Williams, who had once considered David his most promising student, ran into him at the grocery store one day. "David, I heard you were still in town. Are you thinking about coming back to school?" "I'm conducting my own research now," David had replied. I'm studying extraterrestrial communication patterns. Dr. Williams had looked at him with a mixture of pity and concern. David, that's not real science. You can't build a career on fantasies about alien contact. What if the fantasies are real? David had asked. Dr. Williams walked away without answering, probably thinking that David had proven his point about mental illness. But David didn't care what anyone thought anymore. He had found purpose in his obsession. Every day brought him closer to finding proof that Luna existed, that her people were real, that somewhere in the vast universe there was a woman who had once loved him, enough to sacrifice her own memories. His family had essentially given up on him. His parents still called occasionally, usually to ask if he needed money or if he was eating properly. But they had stopped trying to convince him to seek help. His sister, who used to visit him regularly, now only sent birthday cards. David had become a ghost in his own life, barely existing in the human world while he searched desperately for evidence of another one. But he refused to give up. Every clear night, he would set up his equipment and scan the skies. Every morning, he would review the data he had collected, looking for patterns, anomalies, anything that might be a sign. And sometimes, just sometimes, his equipment would detect something unusual, a signal that lasted exactly 47 seconds before disappearing. Radio waves that seemed to be coming from the direction of Vega, electromagnetic patterns that didn't match anything in the scientific literature. These moments kept David going. They were proof that he wasn't completely insane, that there really was something out there waiting to be discovered. What David didn't know was that Luna's people had been looking for her too. Her ship had been scheduled to return years ago, and when she failed to arrive, they had begun searching Earth's electromagnetic spectrum for any sign of her presence. And David's desperate, lonely search for proof of alien life was about to attract the attention of beings far more advanced than he could imagine. His 5 years of obsession were about to pay off in ways he never expected. The answers he had been searching for were closer than he thought. David had never expected to be invited to speak at a scientific conference again. His reputation in the academic community was essentially ruined. Most professors considered him a cautionary tale about what happens when brilliant students have mental breakdowns. But Dr. Chen, who ran a small research institute focused on unusual astronomical phenomena, had been following David's independent work for months. Your signal analysis is actually quite impressive, Dr. Chen had told him over the phone. I'd like you to present your findings at our annual conference. It's small, but the attendees are genuinely interested in unexplored areas of science. David almost said no. The idea of standing in front of other scientists and talking about his search for alien signals felt terrifying. What if they laughed at him? What if they thought he was as crazy as everyone else did? But then he realized this might be his only chance to share his research with people who might actually listen. Maybe someone in the audience would have ideas or equipment that could help him in his search. The conference was held in a small hotel conference room with maybe 30 people in attendance. Most of them were graduate students, independent researchers, and a few professors from smaller universities. David recognized the type, scientists who were interested in topics that mainstream academia considered too risky or unconventional. David's presentation was scheduled for late in the afternoon. He spent the morning in his hotel room, going over his notes and trying to calm his nerves. He hadn't spoken to a group of scientists in 5 years. He wasn't sure he even remembered how to do it properly. When it was time for his presentation, David walked to the front of the room carrying a laptop and a folder full of charts and graphs. His hands were shaking slightly as he connected his computer to the projector. "Thank you for having me," he began, his voice sounding rusty from lack of use in formal settings. "My name is David Martinez, and I want to talk to you today about unusual radio signals I've been detecting from the Vega system." As David began showing his data, he noticed that the audience was actually paying attention. These weren't mainstream scientists who would dismiss his work automatically. These were people who understood that the universe was full of mysteries that couldn't be explained by conventional research. Over the past 5 years, I've documented over 100 instances of organized electromagnetic activity, originating from a region approximately 25 light-years from Earth, David continued, showing slides of his signal analysis. In the back of the room, a woman was taking careful notes. David noticed her because she seemed to be writing down everything he said, not just the main points like the other attendees. She had long dark hair and was wearing a simple business suit, but there was something about her that seemed familiar. The signals appeared to follow a pattern that suggests intelligent origin, David explained. They're too organized to be natural phenomena, but they don't match any known human satellites or space missions. David showed more slides, including some of his most compelling evidence. Signals that had been detected multiple times, always, lasting exactly the same duration, always coming from the same coordinates in space. What's particularly interesting is that these signals have been increasing in frequency and intensity over the past 2 years. It's almost as if someone is actively searching for something, or someone on Earth. The woman in the back of the room suddenly looked up from her notes, and David caught sight of her face for the first time. His heart nearly stopped beating. It was Luna. She looked exactly the same as she had 5 years ago. Maybe wearing different clothes and with her hair styled differently, but it was definitely her. The same face, the same graceful posture, even the same way of holding her head when she was concentrating on something. But she was looking at him with no recognition at all, just polite scientific interest like any other audience member. David tried to continue his presentation, but seeing Luna had thrown him completely off balance. His hands started shaking worse, and he lost his place in his notes. "I'm sorry," he said, taking a deep breath. "These signals have been the focus of my research for several years now, and I believe they represent our best evidence for extraterrestrial intelligence attempting to communicate with Earth." Someone in the audience raised their hand. "Have you considered that these might be reflections of our own technology, bounced off atmospheric layers or space debris?" David answered the question, but he kept glancing at Luna. She was still taking notes, still showing no sign that she recognized him. It was like looking at a photograph of someone you loved, but knowing the photograph couldn't see you back. After answering several more questions, David reached the end of his presentation. "I believe these signals represent an attempt by an advanced civilization to locate someone or something on our planet. If I'm right, then we may be on the verge of the most important discovery in human history." The audience applauded politely, and David began packing up his equipment. Several people came forward to ask follow-up questions, but David kept watching Luna, who was still sitting in her seat, staring at her notes with a confused expression. As the crowd began to thin out, David worked up the courage to approach her. "Excuse me," he said, walking over to where she was sitting. "I noticed you were taking detailed notes during my presentation. Are you working in this field too?" Luna looked up at him, and David felt his heart break all over again. She was looking at him like he was a complete stranger, just as she had that night on the rooftop 5 years ago. "Dr. Elena Voss," she said, extending her hand for a professional handshake. "I'm a xenobiologist at the Northern Research Institute. Your presentation was very interesting." Elena, she was using a different name now, but it was definitely Luna. David shook her hand, noticing that her skin still felt warm in that same unusual way he remembered. "I specialize in theoretical biology of extraterrestrial life," Elena continued. "Your signal analysis suggests communication patterns that would be consistent with the type of intelligence I study." David couldn't believe what he was hearing. Luna Elena was now working as a scientist studying extraterrestrial life. The irony was almost too much to handle. "Have you published any papers on your research?" David asked, trying to keep the conversation going. "Several, actually. Though I have to admit, sometimes I feel like I'm working from intuition rather than just data. It's strange, but I often have insights about extraterrestrial biology that I can't quite explain scientifically." David's pulse quickened. Maybe the memory erasure hadn't been as complete as Luna had thought. Maybe some part of her real knowledge was still there, buried under the artificial identity. "That's interesting. Do you ever feel like you're remembering things rather than discovering them?" Elena paused, and for a moment, David thought he saw a flicker of confusion cross her face. That's an odd question. Why would you ask that? Before David could answer, he decided to take the biggest risk of his life. My name is David Martinez, he said clearly, emphasizing each word. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Elena's face went completely pale, and she dropped her pen. She stared at David like she had seen a ghost, her mouth slightly open in shock. What did you say? She whispered. David Martinez. My name is David Martinez. Elena stood up abruptly, knocking over her chair. She was trembling, and her eyes had a wild, frightened look. I need to, she started to say, but couldn't finish the sentence. David could see that something was happening to her. It was like watching someone try to remember a dream that was slipping away, but parts of it were coming back in fragments. Elena, are you okay? David asked, reaching out to steady her. When his hand touched her arm, Elena gasped for just a moment. Her eyes seemed to change, becoming more reflective, almost silver in the conference room lighting. I know you, she said, her voice barely audible. I know your voice, but that's impossible. I've never seen you before in my life. Are you sure about that? David asked gently. Elena was looking around the room like she expected to find answers written on the walls. I feel like I'm supposed to remember something important, but I can't quite reach it. This has been happening to me for years. Dreams about places that don't exist, knowledge about things I've never studied. David's heart was racing. The memory block was breaking down. After 5 years, hearing his name had triggered something deep in Luna's mind. Elena, what if I told you that we've met before? What if I told you that you once knew everything about me? That's impossible, Elena said. But she didn't sound convinced. I would remember meeting someone like you. I would remember. She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes growing wide. The dreams, she whispered. I've been dreaming about someone named David for years. Someone I was supposed to find. But I could never see his face clearly. David felt tears forming in his eyes. What else do you remember? Stars, Elena said, her voice growing stronger. I remember talking about stars with someone, and feeling like I had lost something important, something I could never get back. She looked directly at David, and for the first time in 5 years, he saw a hint of recognition in her eyes. Who are you? She asked. And why do I feel like my whole life has been leading up to this moment? David smiled through his tears.